All right, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies class, I have been going through a series of video presentations I'm creating based off of the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I'm in the CSS part in the CSS layout module, and we're talking Flexbox. So, you can, if you've got multiple Flex things you want to set up, you can put them on multiple lines or you can put them on one line. All right, so in other words, in the code that we put in here, all right, I think this is, let's see. So if we had the direction and we wanted to wrap, we could just combine them if we wanted to, okay? All right, so it says, let's go back to our first example and look at how we can control the proportion of space items. It says fire up your local copy of Flexbox 0 or take a copy of Flexbox 1 as the new starting point. So I'll grab that. All right, so we have that. Let's take a quick look at and see what it does look like currently. Okay, pretty similar to what we'd already seen, so that's good. First, add the following rule to the bottom of your CSS. All right. And let's see what that did. As of right now, doesn't look like much of anything. Let's double check. All right, it says this is a unitless proportion value that dictates how much space, how much of the available space along the main axis each flex item is going to take compared to the other ones. So we're giving them all the same value, so they should all take about the same amount. So in other words, all right, they should each be taking up a third. It says now add the following rule below the previous one. All right. So below this, and again, let's look at it, then go back and kind of decompose what's going on here. All right. You'll notice that the third article is now taking up more room. How much more? Well, it looks as though it is taking up as much room as these two put together. All right. It says now when you refresh, you see that the third article takes up twice as much available width as the other two. There are now 4 proportion units available. 1 for the first article, 1 for the second article, 2 for the third article. The first 2 items, flex items as it says, have 1 unit each, so they each take up a quarter. The last one has 2 units, so it takes up a half. All right. You can also specify the minimum size inside of a flex value. Try updating your existing article rules like this. So I believe we'll have to replace what's in there with this. All right, as always, it's the best is to run this. Take a look at it and see what it does. All right. It says each flex item will be given the first 200 pixels of the available space. After that, the rest of the available space will be shared according to the proportional units. It says try refreshing, and this is what you'll see. The real value of Flexbox can be seen in its flexibility or responsiveness. If you resize the browser window or add another article, the layout continues to work just fine. Okay. All right. Flex, as it says there, is a shorthand property that can specify up to 3 different values. It says the unit list property was the one we discussed above. You can specify these individually with flex grow. The second one, flex shrink, comes into play when items are overflowing their container. Flex shrink will specify how much of the overflowing amount is taken away to stop them from overflowing. Finally, you've got flex basis. And as it says, the minimum size value was discussed above. This can be specified individually using the flex basis longhand. Now in here they advise against using the longhand flex properties unless you really have a reason to. All right, so let's go in and take a look at what we have here. All right, you can also use Flexbox features to align flex items across the main or cross axis. Let's explore this by looking at the next example. All right, and you'll notice we have what looks like we've got 5 buttons. Let's see what this looks like. And there they are. Smile, laugh, wink, shrug, blush. All right. It says refresh the page and you'll see that the buttons are now nicely centered. Well, they're not because I didn't add this yet, which said not only to display flex, but to align the items in the center. So let's put that in. All right, so again, let's put that in to our CSS. And that is saying that any div, as you can see, should display flex. It should align, and so all the stuff that's in here should be flexed, and it should align them to the center and the content space around. So it should look pretty much centered on there. So you'll see it changes from this to this. All right, it's centered on the page, and there's an equal amount of space between each one of these. You'll notice that's not true for the ends here. All right, and there's a way that you can fix that as well. All right, now it says here align items controls where the flex items sit on the cross axis. By default, the value is stretch. As mentioned, it stretches all flex items to fill the parent in the direction of the cross axis. All right, if the parent doesn't have a fixed width, then all the items will become as long as the longest item. The center does what you think it would do. It causes the item to maintain their dimensions, but they're centered along the axis. You can also have flex start and flex end, which will align all our items at the start or all items at the end. Now that should make sense to you already, but just in case it doesn't, all right? As it says, before we do the first item here, or the first child, let's look at this. And again, it is said here that we could use the flex start and the flex end. I think we put it in like this. Oops, Z. So flex start. Not sure if that's the right syntax for this or not. We're going to find out very quickly. All right. And notice how it moved them up. All right, so there's a lot of different things that we can add here. This first button to do a flex end says you can override the align items behavior by applying the align self property. It says try doing this. So there's different effects that you can get, in other words, okay? So let's look at this one. I'm going to remove what we had here. This said center. All right, we'll come into here. We'll add this. All right, it's just the first one. And it's telling it to align just the first one. All right, to flex in. So let's see if indeed that looks like this. And you can see it does. It took the centering away, in other words. All right, it's still aligned with the rest of them, but it's not centered as the rest of them are. And we just pulled one out because we did the first child. Should also be able to, for example, do the last child. All right. And I'm not sure if there's an nth child. I might be jumping ahead a little bit. So this may or may not work. All right, it did work. There is a second one. All right. It says have a look at what effect this has and remove it again after you're finished. Justify content controls where the flex items sit on the main axis. The default is flex start. You can use flex end. You can use justify content. You can use space around. And you can use space between. All right. So again, multiple ways of doing this. All right. Ordering. It says Flexbox has a feature for changing the layout order without affecting the source order. So let's do this. It says try adding this to our default code. Well, before we do this, let's go back into here and I'm going to remove what we put in here. All right. So let's double check and make sure that it's acting again the way that we expect it to be. There you go. All right, so we're going to come into here then. And say button first child, and we've got an order 1 here. So what did that do? All right. Well, smile now went to the end. So let's look at it without this. So we can look at the order and then let's look at it again. So I'm going to remove this. And we have smile, laugh, wink, shrug, blush. So remember, laugh, wink, shrug, blush. There's laugh, wink, shrug, blush, but smile has now been moved to the end. All right. So it says refresh, and you'll see that the smile has been moved to the end of the main axis. Let's talk about how this works, it says here, in more detail. By default, all flex items have an order value of 0. Flex items with a higher order value set on them will appear later in the display, and that's why since we put the 1 in there, it moved to the end. All right. Flex items with the same order will appear in their source order. Okay, and it says the third appears after the second because it has the same order and it is after it in the source order. You can also work with negative numbers in here. So if we wanted to force blush to be first, again, let's remove this. And blush, which is now here, so it's item 1, 2, 3, 4, now is at the beginning. The rest of the stuff that's in there, the smile, laugh, wink, shrug, that appears in the same natural order. This is the only one that we've changed. All right. As they mention here, it is possible to create some pretty complex layouts with Flexbox. It is perfectly okay to set a flex item to also be a flex container so that its children will also be laid out like flex boxes. This, I would say at least, is a fairly complex layout. All right, so it says let's have a look at complex layout 0. I'm at 1620, so what I'm going to do is quickly copy this, verify that indeed the way that it looks the way that it says it's going to look, and then we will continue on in the next iteration of this. There you go. All right, so we'll be back with this in the next part of the lesson.